He lives in a pineapple at the bottom of the sea, okay. All yellow, absorbent, and porous is he, right, But what do we really know about Spongebob Squarepants? What is he hiding? Spongebob Squarepants has been entertaining kids and adults for decades now with its kinetic irreverence and unflappably optimistic central character. It's a world centered around a rectangular yellow kitchen sponge, his starfish best friend, the squid and crab he works for, and a deep-sea diving squirrel. That may take some explaining, but thankfully fans are here to fill in the gaps. Let's look at some of the more hardcore SpongeBob theories. Let's just get this one out of the way, as it's the one most people are familiar with. Bikini Bottom is a bizarre place. Hordes of anchovies, a burger stand run by a crab, a pufferfish teaches folks how to drive boats underwater, a squirrel that lives in a dome. What kind of nightmare of social and biological evolution could create such a thing? Well, the same thing that brought us Godzilla and Silver Age comic book heroes like Spider-Man and the Hulk. Good old-fashioned radiation. The clue is right there in the name of the town, Bikini Bottom. Situated in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and Papua New Guinea are the Marshall Islands, and within those islands is an atoll with a lagoon that the natives call Bikini, which became Bikini as in the Bikini Atoll. After the Second World War, the United States was put in charge of those islands and thought, this is pretty. What would it look like if it exploded? 23 nuclear tests were performed in Bikini Atoll overall, permanently changing not only the landscape but also contaminating the area with radiation for decades still to come. All that radiation will lead to Godzillas and really sincere sponges with a talent for making Krabby Patties. There's an entirely not uncommon thing that happens to just about every series that derives humor from a character who is naive or not always the brightest bulb in the tree. They get dumber over the course of the show. Once you go to the dummy well for humor, well, the character can only get dumber from there. The phenomenon has not escaped die-hard SpongeBob fans. In early seasons, SpongeBob wasn't dumb so much as naive and eternally optimistic. But he appeared to know how the world worked and was even left to explain these things to his friend Patrick. As the show has gone on, however, SpongeBob has seemed to be slower on the uptake. The theory is that the show is out of order. Well, it's less of a theory and more of what creator Steven Hillenberger has said. The first 3 seasons and the first movie all happen after the events from season 4 onward, meaning that season 4 starts a prequel to the first 3 seasons and movie, which is why they don't reflect what happens in the movie.
That's totally unfair!
Mind blown. SpongeBob and pals aren't the only ones to make their lives in a remote lagoon and have wacky adventures. Once upon a time, a group of mismatched people set out on the SS Minnow for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. That of course went wrong and they ended up stranded on an island they named after the ship's first mate for some reason, and so they were on Gilligan's Island. The creator later revealed that he based his castaways on the 7 deadly sins, a set of behaviors that will lead people to a life of sin. Sloth is a way of saying lazy, and would be embodied by Patrick. It's not a reluctance to work hard, but not to use his talents like strength. Envy is beyond just thinking your friends have groovy stuff, but feeling like you've been robbed of groovy stuff, like the Krusty Krab recipe that Plankton is so constantly in pursuit of. Lust these days is generally thought of in terms of things adults can do in the dark, but philosophically it's been thought of as having too much love in general. Since SpongeBob loves everybody, like a lot.
I love you so much, Gary.
Like a problematic amount, then SpongeBob, of course, represents lust. Greed, of course, is an easy concept to understand with Mr. Krabs, who lives for making money. Since Gary, for the most part, just eats, he gets gluttony. Wrath is taking your anger out on others, a particular specialty of one Mr. Squidward. The other is pride. Is a squirrel that's managed to set up a life at the bottom of the sea is a lot to be proud of. Plus, she's from Texas. Hoo-ha! This theory has some big fans, like Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob Squarepants. Don't buy the 7 deadly sins? Well, there's another list of traits that could represent the various characters in the show. The American Psychiatric Association has released a book called The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's a book that your friend in Psych 1 is using to tell you what's wrong with you. You know, that book. The theory goes that each of the characters features something in the DSM. SpongeBob's fleeting attention might be the result of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Oh, hey, Mr. Krabs. When did you get in here?
Or ADHD. Patrick would be developmental disabilities. Plankton, narcissism. Squidward, of course, depression. even if this theory isn't true, and it would be pretty bleak to build a show that way. The show has spawned scholarly papers that use the show to examine these issues. Who says learning can't be fun, huh? But how about some other habits? Habits that maybe that uncle has we don't like to talk about, huh? That's right, each of the characters represent the effects of various narcotics. SpongeBob would be eating something that makes him hallucinate, for instance. Mr. Krabs and Mr. Puff might inhale something that makes them really intense and a bit cranky. Squidward's always down and might be mainlining something that keeps him that way. Patrick's two-step life of sleeping and eating might be fueled by something he inhaled. Well, you get the idea.
Snoop Dogg!
One of the most carefully kept secrets in Bikini Bottom is the secret ingredient to Krabby Patties. It's the one thing that Plankton wants, and will go to incredible lengths to get the formula, including putting SpongeBob's brain in a robot body, in the hopes that he could command SpongeBob to tell him the formula. But what's in those patties? There's a lot of theories. For really dark sake, there's the theory that Mr. Krabs is selling his own kind crab, or instead, dreaded anchovies. Redditor Cromye, yay, comes in with the theory that in the pilot Help Wanted, Mr. Krabs and Squidward are terrified of the incoming school of anchovies because he's afraid they found out that he's been making his famous burgers out of them. It's only through SpongeBob's grill skills that they're fed the baddies and convinced they don't eat their own kind. So what happens at the Krusty Krab when SpongeBob is riding the hooks with Patrick or stealing Sandy's moon rocket? When Squidward and SpongeBob are on an epic quest to deliver a pizza, who mans the shop? Certainly not Mr. Krabs, he's more of the yell and count the money type. We never see any other employees. It could be because the other employees are unseeable. SpongeBob and crew have run into ghosts before while exploring old ships. So the theory goes that ghosts then run the Krusty Krab when their hotshot grill operator isn't on site to deliver the goodness, or Squidward's out being annoyed or bummed out by something SpongeBob is doing. Why do they decide to be invisible the entire time? Face it, if you could do your job while invisible, wouldn't you? It was all a dream, a dream, a dream, a dream. It's a storytelling conceit that has appeared in short stories like Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Pierce, all the way to the series finale of sitcoms like Newhart that suggested the show was a dream had by the character from Bob Newhart's first sitcom. In the case of SpongeBob, the mind this is taking place in is a car crash survivor. This takes two forms. First is that it's all the hallucination of the driver. The damage and lack of oxygen give everything the surreal nature. And SpongeBob's difficulty learning to drive comes from the driver's latest failure. The other is meant to speak to the getting dumber issue, that SpongeBob's change in appearance to more square and weird is a result of reconstructive surgery and his behavior is brain damage from the accident. This includes the shift in Mrs. Puff's attitude as she becomes less patient with SpongeBob, the way you would if they drove you into a wall. Since we're on the subject of trying to explain why SpongeBob seems to be getting stupider, there's another theory that revolves around this specific event. In the episode Squilliam Returns, Squidward asks SpongeBob to empty his mind of everything that doesn't have to do with fine dining or breathing. Eager to please and sometimes too literal, we get a look into SpongeBob's brain office, where the order comes down to empty everything out but fine dining and breathing, so they get to work. They're so good at it, they even throw out his name. As it turns out, that episode happens during the third season, right before SpongeBob's intelligence took a dive. The theory goes that after SpongeBob emptied his brain, he never filled it back up again. As a result, SpongeBob became a lot stupider as he has to relearn the whole world. We don't really know that much about Mr. Krabs. We know that he likes money, we know that he owns the Krusty Krab, and we know that he can be temperamental, and we know that he has a daughter named Pearl. The hitch, of course, is that Mr. Krab is a crab and Pearl is a whale. This raises so many questions about how reproduction and genetics work in the world of Spongebob Squarepants, but the less we think about that, the better. The less we think about that. Sidestepping the issues of Rule 34, there's other explanations. The simplest, of course, is that Pearl is adopted. But Mr. Krabs taking in an orphan and raising her with love and devotion isn't particularly dark. I mean, good job, Mr. Krabs. But if that whole father-daughter thing that was a story, a cover for a relationship that was less father and daughter and more May-December, that would make Mr. Krabs less of a father and more of a sugar daddy who pays Pearl's rent and pays for her college in exchange for a few recreational weekends. Now that's darker, especially when it comes to Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff. Now those are some of the darker theories about the latest show on television. What is your favorite theory? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, why not subscribe to CBR for the latest videos in your inbox? Thanks for watching.